He married her in secret and brought her into the house I built, while I was still unpacking my hospital bag. I saw her before she saw me. She was humming, wearing my apron, pouring my tea. My chair was pulled back like someone had just stood up. My wedding photo was gone, replaced with a framed cross-stitch that read, "Welcome home." She smiled at the sugar bowl like she belonged there, and I just stood in the hallway, holding my discharge papers. He didn't think I'd come back that soon. Didn't think I'd notice, but I did. I noticed everything. The curtains I sewed were tied in bows I never made. The rug was turned. My dog wasn't barking. He was wagging his tail. And I wasn't confused. I was calculating. No screaming. No tears. Just a quiet click in my mind, like a switch had flipped. They thought I was done. That I'd wither away in that hospital bed. That the woman who'd folded his laundry for 41 years was too weak to fight back. But I didn't die. I watched. I listened. I counted every drawer she opened. I watched which cup she picked. I learned her routine like a soldier studies terrain. And I smiled when she asked, "Do you live around here?" That's when I knew she didn't know. He hadn't told her. Not everything. So I played along. For now. Because silence isn't surrender. It's the start of war. We were just kids when we married. No savings, no furniture, no plan beyond loving each other through whatever came. Our first apartment had peeling paint and a leaky faucet that sang all night long, but it felt like a castle. We had one pan, 2 plates, and no curtains, so I stitched old bedsheets and made do. He'd call me his queen when the lights went out and we pretended the shadows on the wall were chandeliers. We didn't have much, but I gave everything. I gave my time, my sleep, my body. I gave up college when the first baby came, and the second followed before we ever found our footing. I gave. I cooked. I waited. I forgave. I worked nights at the diner, walking home with aching feet just to catch the sunrise from the kitchen window while packing lunchboxes. I braided hair with tired fingers. I ironed his shirts while he watched the news. I learned to stretch $1 till it screamed. There was one winter, he'd lost his job, and I pawned my wedding ring to pay the gas bill. He never knew. I told him it slipped off at the sink. I gave. I smiled. I stayed. I sewed Halloween costumes from pillowcases. I skipped dentist visits so the kids could have braces. I wore the same winter coat for 14 years. He called it vintage. I called it necessary. Every birthday cake was homemade. Every fight was swallowed. Every disappointment folded into my chest like laundry. I thought that was love. I thought we were partners. I thought my loyalty meant something. He'd kiss my forehead and say I was his home. I believed him, even when he forgot anniversaries, even when he stayed late at work 3 nights a week, even when he didn't ask how my surgery went, just told me not to overdo it. I gave. I forgave. I waited. But now I see it clearer. I was the meal, the roof, the silence, the safety net. And once they no longer needed me, they erased me. No warning. No goodbye. Just swapped me out like a cracked dish. I pawned my ring once to keep him warm. He gave it to her in a new box. He started coming home late. Not just once or twice, but often enough that I began to memorize the way the clock ticked at midnight. At first, I told myself it was the job, that maybe he had more pressure than he was letting on. I even ironed his shirts extra crisp those mornings, hoping he'd feel supported, hoping it would soften him. But the small things started slipping. He stopped pouring my coffee, didn't ask about my appointments. One night, I burned my hand on the stove, and he didn't look up from his phone. I told myself he was distracted, tired. The world was hard, after all, and he'd never been good with emotions. Maybe I was expecting too much. But then he started saying things that didn't sound like him. One morning, while I stood in my robe, rubbing lotion into the swelling on my knee, he looked at me and said, "You still look good for someone your age." I smiled, tried to take it as a compliment, but it sat in my stomach like spoiled milk. For someone your age. Like I was a memory. A ghost still wandering the kitchen. He started locking his phone, leaving it face down, asking me if I'd recently changed the bank passwords, though I never touched them. One day he came home and asked if we could go over our assets. Said it was time to get things in order just in case. I asked in case of what. He just shrugged. said nothing lasts forever. I laughed, because that's what we did, right? We joked through the hard parts. I kissed his cheek, told him I was going nowhere, and I meant it. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to see what was plain. I told myself he was tired. That men get odd with age. Withdrawn. He didn't say I love you anymore, but he didn't say he didn't either. Then there was that night. I was coming down the hallway, slow and quiet from the meds, and I heard him on the phone. He didn't hear me. He was laughing. That easy laugh I hadn't heard in years. And then he said it. She won't be around much longer. Don't worry. My ears rang. I stood behind the doorframe like a statue, my heart thudding not fast, but slow and hard, like it was trying to warn me. But I still found a way to excuse him. Maybe he meant my recovery. Maybe he was trying to protect me from some burden I didn't know about. I went back to bed and told myself it was nothing. Just stress. Just work. Just life piling up. I defended him in my mind like I always had, because I wanted so badly to believe he was still mine. He told me I looked tired, said I should rest a while at my sister's, just for a week. Let your body heal, he said, setting down my overnight bag before I even agreed. I didn't want to go. I said the sheets still smelled like bleach from the hospital. I said I missed my own bed. He kissed my forehead, soft and cold, and whispered, "You'll feel better away for a bit." I tried to believe it was kindness. I packed light, one coat, a Bible, my crochet needles, left my robe on the hook, told him I'd be back before Sunday. He smiled and said, "Take your time." I didn't know what he meant by that. My sister's house was warm, but my heart was cold. Every night, I dreamed I was in my kitchen, only the walls were breathing, and I couldn't find the stove. On the 7th day, I took a cab home without calling. I wanted to surprise him. I wanted to be wrapped in my own towels, to sit in my chair and drink my tea. But when I stepped into the hallway, it smelled different. It smelled like her, powdery and sweet, like fake roses and cheap lipstick. Not the cinnamon and lemon oil I'd used for 40 years. There were boxes by the wall. My boxes, labeled miscellaneous and old linens. The living room was rearranged. My quilt was gone. The clock was ticking too fast. A woman in my apron turned from the stove and smiled like I was a guest. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Call me ma'am." I didn't answer. I looked past her to the mantel. My wedding photo was gone. A photo of them had taken its place, arms around each other, matching smiles like a Christmas card. My hand shook but didn't raise. I walked down the hall. My robe was gone. My name wasn't on the bathroom drawer. Even the toothpaste was new. I opened the closet and found it empty. Only hangers, not even dust where my shoes once sat. I reached for my phone, tried to check the bank account. Access denied. Tried my card, declined. My name was still on the mailbox, but not on the life I'd built. I sat down on the porch because the walls felt like strangers. I waited for him to come home. He didn't. I stayed until night fell. I knocked. No one opened. I called. No answer. I tried my key. The lock had changed. He took everything. Not in anger. Not in heat. But in silence. With a smile. Like a man laying new carpet over old bones. They'd moved on while I was gone. They'd repainted over my story like it never mattered. My clothes were boxed like donations. My marriage erased like chalk on a wet board. And still I didn't scream. I just sat there with a wallet that didn't work in front of a door that used to be mine, while her perfume drifted through my curtains. I wasn't dead, but I'd been buried all the same. I didn't cry on the porch. I just sat there until the streetlights hummed on. Then I stood, walked to the end of the block, and called a cab to the library. Not home, not my sister's, the library. It was the only place that still felt like mine. I sat in the far corner, behind the genealogy shelves, and opened my old cloth purse. Pulled out the notebook I used to track grocery lists and birthdays, and I started writing. Not poems, not pleas, facts, dates, names. I wrote down the day I pawned my wedding ring, the account number we opened in '82, the time he left the hospital room, saying he'd get coffee and never came back. I wasn't screaming. I was writing. I listed every bill I'd paid, every home repair I arranged, every signature that passed through my hands. 41 years of paper cuts and receipts. I remember the time he begged me to co-sign a second mortgage and promised it was just for a year. I found the folder. My name was first. I called an old friend, Mary. She used to work at the county office. We hadn't talked in 7 years, but she answered like we were still standing side by side at the bake sale. I told her everything, not with tears, with facts. She said, "I remember what you gave him." That was enough. Next morning, I went to the storage unit I'd kept after my mother passed. Inside were tax boxes, marriage certificates, even my old journals, the ones he called silly. I read through them like blueprints. I looked at my past not as a memory, but as a case file. I scanned deeds. Notice dates didn't line up. His signature changed halfway through. I found an old check stub made out to a name I didn't recognize. I looked up the name. It was hers. She'd been around longer than I thought. Each note I took steadied my hands. Each document gave me back a brick of the foundation he thought he'd stolen. I stopped asking why they did it. I started asking what I still owned. The lawyer was older than me by maybe 5 years. Silver hair in a perfect bun, heels that didn't wobble once on the path to my front door. She had a clipboard, a leather folder, and a face that didn't flinch. Her name was Ruth, and she came highly recommended by Mary. Said she only took on women who'd been silenced. When I opened the door to greet her, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt like a house with its lights back on. Ruth smiled, squeezed my hand, and said, "Let's go get your life." We walked up the steps of what used to be mine. I still remembered how the wood creaked on the third board, and it still did. The door opened, and there she was, the woman in my apron, standing with a spatula like she might be asked to flip pancakes mid-eviction. My husband, or what was left of him, appeared from the hallway. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. "You can't just barge in," he tried. Ruth didn't blink. She pulled out a document and handed it to him like a receipt. "The marriage license you filed was invalid," she said. "Still legally married. And the house? Still in her name. Fully. Title never transferred." She turned to me, calm as ever. "You have every right to be here." He stammered something about calling his own lawyer. Ruth nodded. "Please do. The financial hold is already filed. Accounts are frozen. Any attempt to move assets now will be seen as fraud." His face lost its color. The woman behind him finally spoke. Something about not knowing, about being misled. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than anything I could have said. Ruth continued, listing the items I'd be reclaiming, from legal access to shared pensions, to vehicle titles, to control of the deed. "You have 72 hours to vacate," she told them. "After that, we'll proceed with formal removal if necessary." They didn't argue much. Just packed slowly over the next 2 days, like they were waking up from a dream. I didn't rush them. I stayed in a hotel around the corner and returned only once, just to sit in the driveway and watch the lights go out. On the third day, I came home. Alone. My apron was on the kitchen hook. My chair was pulled back like it had waited. The quiet was heavy but not empty. It was mine. I stood in the doorway and exhaled everything I'd held for months. Ruth came by later with a folder. She handed it to me with a look that said, "You did it." I didn't raise my voice. The paper did the screaming for me. Pages signed in black ink, clauses worded in the language of justice. I thanked her, not with words, but with strong tea and a slice of cake. She said she hadn't had cake in months. I said neither had I. I walked through each room like I was reintroducing myself, touched the counters, opened the windows, smelled the lemon oil. I changed the locks myself, not out of fear, but for closure. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt healed, like it had been waiting for the woman who built it to come back and take her seat. And I did, quietly, fully. I didn't tell anyone, not even Ruth. I just walked into the realtor's office, signed the paperwork, and handed over the keys. No ceremony, no second thoughts. The house had memories, yes, but it also had ghosts. Ghosts that wore his cologne, that whispered betrayal every time the floor creaked. It was never going to be home again. So I let it go. I priced it below market. I didn't want profit. I wanted speed. The sign went up on a Thursday. By Monday, there were 3 offers. I took the second one. Cash. No contingencies. And then I waited. Quietly. Strategically. He called the next week. I watched his name flash across my phone. The same number that used to call to ask if I needed milk. I blocked it. He tried again. Blocked. Email. Blocked. He sent a letter. I didn't open it. I dropped it into a drawer I no longer owned. I wasn't angry. I was done. The realtor said he looked shocked when she handed him the sale notice. Said he stood in the living room, eyes wide, mouth open like he was choking on his own comfort. The woman beside him, the one who called me ma'am, looked at the papers and turned pale. She asked if this was legal. The realtor nodded. Her name was never removed, she said. She didn't even need his signature. They had 60 days to vacate, and no power to stop it. I came back once, just to collect a few things. A suitcase with clothes. My mother's tea set. The sewing machine that still smelled like cedar. I saw them through the window, standing in the kitchen like statues, not speaking. He didn't come out until I was at the gate. He stepped onto the driveway, slow, tentative, like a boy about to ask his teacher for mercy. I didn't stop. I didn't speak. I didn't even glance up. I just rolled my suitcase past him, heels clicking steady against the pavement. He opened his mouth, closed it, watched me like a ghost. But I wasn't floating. I was walking, solid, real, and leaving him in the dust. He watched me walk away with nothing, because that was more than I ever got from him. And I was fine with that. I didn't need a lamp or a couch or a single apology. I had my name, my breath, my proof that quiet women aren't weak. They're just patient. I didn't yell. I sold it. The calls came slowly at first. One from his sister, who hadn't spoken to me in years. She left a voicemail, soft and trembling. He's sorry, she said. He's been crying. He didn't think it would go that far. I deleted it. Then came a message from our old neighbor, asking if I'd at least hear him out. I didn't reply. Emails followed. One from his daughter, not mine. Not really, just his from before me. The one who once said I was like a mother. She asked if we could meet. Said he was lost. That he hadn't eaten in days. I closed the message. Let it sit in the inbox until it got buried by newsletters and order confirmations. They didn't want me back. They wanted the version of me that cooked on Sundays and forgave without condition. That woman had packed her suitcase and walked past him without looking. She wasn't bitter. She was finally whole. Friends whispered. One even said I was being cruel, that I should let go, that I'd get sick from the weight of silence. But I wasn't carrying anything. I put it down when I blocked the last number. My peace wasn't heavy, it was light as air. I water my plants every morning. Basil and mint by the window. A stubborn orchid on the shelf that finally bloomed after 2 silent years. I read mystery novels and underlined the parts where women saved themselves. I made coffee in silence and drank it warm, not reheated 3 times while waiting on someone else. I walked without telling anyone where I was going. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to forgive. I wasn't punishing him. I was choosing myself, maybe for the first time. And it felt like breathing. Finally, no need. Your hook chapter was already written at the start of this project and fits beautifully into the full arc. Here is the final chapter, the reflection. The apartment is small, just 1 bedroom, a narrow galley kitchen, and a little balcony that faces west. But every inch of it is mine. I picked the curtains, pale yellow with little leaves stitched in. I bought plates with blue flowers, not because they matched anything, but because I liked them. The fridge is stocked with things I never used to buy. Soft cheeses, fresh berries, sparkling water. I don't cook big meals anymore. I cook what I want when I want. Sometimes it's soup. Sometimes just toast and a peach. And it's enough. There's no television blaring in the background. Just music, old jazz on vinyl, the kind that fills the room like a warm hug. I have a notebook on the coffee table. A better one, with a hard cover and thick paper. I still write. Not lists anymore. Just thoughts, memories, bits of myself I'm trying to piece back together. I walk every evening, even when my knees complain. I've made friends at the little bookstore down the block. I know the name of the mailman, and no one calls me ma'am, unless they mean it kindly. There's a mirror by the door. I hung it at eye level, not too high, not too low. And some mornings I just stand in front of it. I look at my face, the lines, the softness, the history, and I smile. Not because everything's perfect, but because I survived it. Because I'm not invisible anymore, at least not to myself. I have a plant on the balcony, just one. A lavender bush in a cracked ceramic pot. It leans a little toward the sun, and I let it. I sit beside it in the evenings with a blanket over my knees and a book in my lap, and I let the world be quiet. No banging doors, no half-spoken apologies, just me and the breeze and the soft sound of leaves brushing against the railing. Maybe I wasn't the burden after all. Maybe I was the weight that held the whole house together. And when they took it all, the kitchen, the name, the bed, I didn't vanish. I rebuilt. Smaller, quieter, stronger. Everything they stole, I replaced. But this time, it's mine.